Right in front without further ado, Laura Giannuzzi, who is not only a teacher at St. Anthony's High School, but also a member of the Catholic ministry team and a chastity speaker, among other things.
Thanks, guys, for the introduction. Thanks for the plug and the CDs and all of that. Again, my name is Laura Giannuzzi, and I am a teacher at St. Anthony's High School, and I work in campus ministry. My specific role is running the retreat program there. And before that, I worked for the diocese on the college level, so I was a campus minister at Hofstra and Stony Brook. Before that, I taught at the elementary level. Before that, I was a college student myself and a high school student myself. So all of this experience that I've had has kind of brought me to where I am today, because I've been working with kids and teens and college students for so many years now, and it's just given me not only my own personal experience of the faith, but working with all these different age levels has helped me to realize what we need to do in the new evangelization to keep our kids Catholic, to keep our teens Catholic. So I'm speaking in a couple of different ways, a couple of different topics. Most importantly, I'm speaking as the catechetical arm, I guess, of the Catholic ministry team. So I remember a couple of years ago when Anthony, my friend, came up to me and said, I have this idea, I think we need to be a bigger part of this new evangelization movement. And he's like, we need to tap into more of our talents, and I'm going to do this with music, and I want you to do this, and I got this idea, we're going to record when he talks, and we're going to make a CD, and I was like, I'm not a speaker, I was like, me? He said, yeah, you teach all the time, you've been doing this so long. I just didn't think of myself in that way, and so I stand up in front of you as an example of you are the new evangelization. You guys are doing this, whether you're on the younger end in the room, or whether you're a teacher, you're an administrator, you're a parent. You are the new evangelization, and that's exactly what I had to realize first: is that I could do this, that I could be part of the new evangelization myself. We started basically, as Charlie said, with some of the hot button issues, some of the things that we thought were most important. And so the first talk that I gave and that we recorded was on chastity. And I remember we decided to kind of pack the room in a parish and have youth in there and young adults. And I remember I was like, oh, I don't know if I still can do this. And then, gave the talk, and it was great, and it was exactly on target, and I got great feedback right away. And I was like, okay, we need to do this. We need to do this. The second talk that we gave and that we recorded is over there as well, is the abortion, the Catholic perspective. Why? Because this is, again, what was the keynote address? These are the topics of our time. This is a new evangelization, is going out there and speaking about these things that are so important, whether it be politically or anything. These are so incredibly important. Fast forward, then those two CDs were kind of done, and I was giving talks, and then we were kind of course, couldn't sit too long, and we were thinking about, well, what's the next thing? Like, what's the most important, and what do we have to concentrate on? And we were like, how about just staying Catholic? Just staying Catholic and maintaining your Catholic identity. Working in a Catholic school, we're constantly talking about Catholic identity. What makes a school Catholic? How many of your parishes are talking about, okay, how do we maintain our Catholic identity? And so we started kind of tossing around some different ideas. And so in my head, I had this idea of this keeping your teens Catholic. Okay, we have these awesome programs like Life Team. We have these youth ministers. We have all of this great stuff going on. But still, what's the backbone there that's going to keep our teens Catholic and bridge that gap then, of course, to college and beyond, to all those young adult initiatives that Charlie was talking about. So I remember talking to some of these guys here, these youth ministers. I said, well, what does it take to keep a teen Catholic? What should I include as I'm talking to parents and I'm talking to young people? What do you have to do to stay Catholic? I'm talking to some of my professors, some of my other people I worked with, and basically I kind of came up with a top 10 list. I think Cardinal Dolan has a good theme there. When you kind of have a list, it just gives you something to stay on point to. And so the rest of my talk is just going to be concentrated, I guess, in a kind of a brief way, just like a summary of what I came up with respect to keeping your teens Catholic. And I think in general it could just be a good model for how to just raise kids in general, but my focus was constantly connecting these things back to the faith. And okay, it's good to have boundaries in general. All parents should have boundaries. But why are boundaries important with respect to our Catholic faith? And so that's what I wanted to spend a little time with here in the remainder of the time that I have with you guys. So the first thing, and again, I know the room is kind of split between parents and young people as well, so I'll kind of try to hit both of you at the same time, because for the young people in the room, you still need to remember these, even if you're towards the end of your teen years, because these things are still going to be important when you go off to college. And for my parents in the room, for my educators, whether you have a child or not, if you're working with children, you need to know the world that they're in. This is very important. I feel like I was just in high school yesterday, and then I remember it's been 10 years now, and it's a different world than when it was when I was a student there. And so I constantly have to stay abreast of what is going on in their world. Otherwise, I'm not going to be the best evangelist that I could possibly be in the year 2012. So the first thing, I kind of work in reverse of my top 10 list here. Number 10 was just knowing who the kids' friends are. Knowing who their friends are. Important for you guys who are students as well, that you maintain those friendships and you know really truly who your friends are, and if they're going to be the kind of friends who are going to keep you on target. For my parents, for my educators, for my people who work in parishes, knowing who they're hanging out with is so incredibly important, because besides you, all the studies have shown that parents are the most important influence on their kids. Even to simple things like the music you like is often the times the music that they like, the places you go on vacation, little things like that. But the moral code that you teach them, parents are going to have the biggest influence on their kids. Next to the parents, it's who they're hanging out with. It's their friends. So you have to know who they're hanging out with. And you have to make sure that these are people that you want them to be around. Preferably, they're people who also have a strong faith. Families that, again, pray together, stay together. Friends who pray together, they're going to stay together. Great if your kids have other role models who are with them that are going to Mass on Sundays, that are praying together. So knowing who their friends are. Number 9, as I was talking to parents especially, they were talking about how important it is as a parent with teenagers and keeping them Catholic is to keep the line of communication open. So I call these daily updates, but basically number 9 is keeping the line of communication open. Again, anybody could be talking about this with respect to teenagers, that we need to keep the lines of communication open with them so that we know what's going on. My connection to faith is that prayer is communication with God. And so primarily you're teaching them by communicating with them, asking them how their day was, staying in connection with them, knowing what's going on in their daily lives. You're teaching them what it means to stay in contact with God, keeping that line of communication open. When I'm teaching, I'm always using the example of, if you text your friend and they never text you back, well, are you really friends with that person? Probably not. If you call them and you leave a voicemail and you never hear back from them, probably why? Because there's no other line of communication. It has to be a two-way street. And that's our relationship with God. Our relationship with God has to be that constant communication. And so I encourage, again, parents especially, to keep that communication line open with their kids. My teenagers in the room who hate when you walk in the door and your parents ask you, well, how was your day or what'd you do? That's their attempt of kind of getting this out of you. So you might want to not hear it the first minute you walk in the door. But that's what they're trying to do, and you should be open to that. Number 8 is understanding their technology. Anytime working with teenagers or young people, you have to know what they are dealing with respect to technology. It's not something to be feared, it's something to be embraced. Again, we were joking about this being available, all of our CDs, everything being on iTunes, because that's the technology that's out there today. Some of my young people in the room might have been watching the Apple keynote last week. Did anybody notice what's not in the new Mac? Did anybody catch in the brand new Mac what's not there anymore? And they said it's going to be the depth of this thing in my hand right here. There's no disk drive. Did anybody catch that? I mean, that's a huge change in technology, that the latest computers are just going to have an SD drive on the side. So that's a huge change. We should be aware of these kinds of things. These kinds of things are very, very important. Facebook, of course, even if you're not on Facebook, you probably know what it is. All of these things, they're called social networking for a reason, because people want to connect. That's our faith. We're communal faith. We want to be communicating with others. We want to be connecting with other people. So understanding how we can use this technology also, not only for good, but understanding where there are the pitfalls, the dangers, the access to pornography. I remember when I was talking to Nolan about planning this particular CD, and I said, what else am I missing, about technology? And he was referring to the whole dating landscape, changing, and the experience that teenagers have, whether you're familiar with it or not, texting and sexting and all that, but that a lot of teenagers, their first experience in a sexual way is not even in person. It's over a picture that was sent or over a video chat. Will you show me this or you do that? And I didn't even think of that. Again, just a few years later, I was like, that wasn't what we were dealing with just a couple of years before. But if we're going to evangelize, if we're going to keep our kids Catholic, if we're going to teach them chastity, we can't forget about addressing some of these things that are oftentimes hard to talk about. We also need to just kind of remember that it's important with respect to our faith to teach our teens to just have some tech-free time. That we need to be quiet. In fact, I had one of the quotes from John Paul II. From Pope Benedict, who said, "Put simply, we're no longer able to hear God. There are too many different frequencies filling our ears." How true is that? I love my Mac. I love my iPhone. I love playing with things on iTunes. But at the same time, we need to be reminded that there are a lot of different frequencies and there's a lot of noise, and we need to make some time for quiet. Number 7, I think is so important, is understanding and defining for our children what freedom and free will is. Most of the time you do a man on the street. In fact, I have my students do a man on the street where they have to go out and they have to ask people what they think freedom and free will is, and ask them what they think the meaning of life is, and all of these kinds of, I call them man on the street questions. And most of the time people say, well, freedom is doing whatever you want. That's the normal man on the street kind of answer. Here we are as Catholics trying to reteach that almost and say, okay, but doing whatever you want, or just kind of having this no-holds-barred kind of thing, usually gets us into more trouble than we're really expecting. So what is really the proper Catholic definition of freedom? We have to know that. To be able to choose the good, that's what it really means to be free. As I say in my classroom, not having anything chaining you down. Not having anything chaining you down, then you're really able to be the person that God created you to be, and you're able to choose what is really ultimately good for you. A lot of times we also confuse, especially I think even in Catholic circles, the definition of free will. And free will, of course, is this great gift that we're given from God that allows us to make our choices and choose what we want to do. And a proper understanding of freedom and free will and making good decisions is going to ultimately keep our kids Catholic. But I think oftentimes what I'm realizing is from the adult level, we're confused about some of these things. And we're not maybe as attuned to kind of what we really should be, how we should be saying it, so that we can teach our kids. Number 6 goes kind of quickly after that. It's just to set boundaries. Setting boundaries is important in general, but in my connection to our Catholic faith here is that our Catholic faith has boundaries. There's limits, there's rules, and there's consequences. And I find the hardest thing these days is that you try to teach about sin, or you try to teach about consequences with respect to our faith or what our faith is teaching, but the culture today doesn't have a lot of boundaries. They don't have a lot of restrictions. They don't have a lot of limits. And so we need to, as Catholic educators, as parish workers, as teachers, we need to be teaching them boundaries so that they see that there are consequences. Then, when we try to explain that our faith has boundaries, that our faith has rules, that our faith has consequences, maybe they're a little bit more aware of what we are speaking about. Number 5, make faith fun. I know this sounds maybe kind of easier said than done, but we need to make the faith fun. I was thinking of Mike talking about how Life Teens started, and how many of our teens, and how many of us, and how many of you have heard your kids say this, whether they're your own children, or they're students in your class, or they're in your youth group. Well, it's just boring. It's not, there's nothing there for me. Making the faith fun starts with your family, starts with how you're approaching it as a teacher, but you have to seek these things out. I'm not saying I want you to leave your parish if your parish doesn't have a Life Teen program. I'm saying, okay, maybe think about bringing it in. Or if there's a parish right next door and your church is still doing nothing after all these years, or your school, or whatever it is still doing nothing that's evangelizing your kids, then you might need to seek that out as a parent or as an educator. Look at what another church is doing. Look at what another family is doing. Look at what another school is doing and say, how can we make the faith fun? You look at an event like we're having at St. Ignatius and you see 600 kids there. And believe me, there's people asking us, well, how do you do this? I see the kids are coming. I see, yeah, they like the dodgeball, but they're coming for the Eucharist. How can we do this? How can we replicate this? So we need to find ways to make the faith fun so that they are wanting to be a part of it. Something as simple as the music. How much of a turnoff that is to a teenager who doesn't want to go to church because it's not applicable to them. I mean, I was so excited for Anthony to get his CD out because people have been asking for that for so long, because they come to these events, they hear this beautiful music, and then they want to be able to do that. Even high schoolers who are like, yeah, I can play those chords on the guitar. I could do that at my school. I could do that at my church. Putting those kinds of resources in the hands so that we can make faith a little bit more fun. Number 4 is, for the parents especially, is about eating together and the communal aspect of the family meal. Of course, this is Eucharist-based, and that eating together provides those opportunities to have the things that I already spoke about, those daily updates, the tech-free time, those family moments where you are able to touch base with your kids who like to eat anyway, so why not strap them to the table, feed them a good meal, and try to talk about the faith. You pray before the meal. Okay, that's your first thing that you do is you pray before the meal to teach them what it means to be Catholic. You pray for the people who prepared the food, even if you're at McDonald's. I mean, that's just a simple thing you can do when you are eating together. Number 3, and I know when I kind of go through the last couple of things quickly, ultimately our role in keeping our kids Catholic is showing them mercy, showing them love. We have to be Christ-like to them. I always fall back to the story of the woman caught in adultery because for me that reminds me of what I need to do as a Catholic educator, as a campus minister, as a friend. Woman's caught in adultery and Jesus doesn't stone her, he doesn't rub her nose in it, but he says, I don't want you to live like this and I don't want you to act like this anymore. So go and sin no more. And so we need to keep our kids Catholic by showing them mercy, showing them that we don't like certain parts of what they're doing, but then teaching them as Christ did to go and be better versions of yourself. Be who God created you to be. Number 2, in my Keeping Your Teens Catholic, was giving God your Sunday. And I'll just kind of use a quick story that taught me from a very early age what it meant to ground the family in faith. We always had these sleepovers, all my girlfriends. And I remember one particular case, the sleepover was a Saturday, going into a Sunday, and I knew before the sleepover even started on Saturday that my family went to 10 o'clock Mass on Sunday. And so I knew that I was going to be going to Mass the next day. Now, I got picked up, and so you might think, well, that was a little awkward, or, you know, wasn't that weird? Did anybody make fun of you? It did not hit me till many years later. 2 things that were so important about that little ritual, you know, that we had. First of all was that it didn't even faze me that I was getting picked up on Sunday morning to go to Mass with my family. Because that's what we did. That was our routine. And so I would almost have kind of missed it if we didn't go to Mass. The second thing that it showed me, and again, I didn't realize this till years later, that my parents, just in a very small way, were showing me giving God your Sunday is what we do as a family. This is how, in the midst of all the other things, and believe me, I was busy, games and all these other practices and things going on, that this is what we do. We give God our Sunday. And if we can't go because there's a game at 10 o'clock, we go the night before, we go later. The other thing I always kind of encourage parents in this particular topic, besides just giving God your Sunday, is frequenting the sacraments together, encouraging them to go together, taking advantage of when the church is offering reconciliation, because again, the days of people going together as a family on Saturday to reconciliation, going to confession together, are not really, that doesn't really exist anymore. But it doesn't mean that we can't take advantage of the sacraments together and encourage your children to go. The last one is setting family faith goals. You want to stay Catholic. You guys, my young people over here, you're going to have some goals in mind. This is what I need to do. This is what I want to do to make the faith important to me in my very life. If you're an educator, if you work in a parish, you need to set some goals with respect to the faith so that you can stay on target with them. I'm a big country fan, and one of my Toby Keith songs is, the line from it is, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. I love that, okay? If you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up somewhere else. So our ultimate goal is heaven, right? We should be aware of that, whether it's for our own lives or for those that we're working with. Our ultimate goal is heaven. But what are the little things that we're going to take and the little things that we're going to use to get there? So setting those family faith goals. If you work in a parish, you start small. You start with smaller programs. Maybe you can't bite off Life Teen right off in the beginning, but you can go on the website and you can look, oh, this is this little webinar he was talking about. This is the training that he was talking about. Maybe your church or whoever can't run this big dodgeball event like we're doing, and you're not going to have 600 people there, but you can start small. You can do something small. For families, I always encourage this, that aren't going to church together as a family. Okay, well, make that your first little commitment. Make that your first, thing that you do together. You decide that we're going to start going together. We're going to start going to Mass together as a family. And little things, and then that starts to snowball. I remember when I was kind of working on this a while ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I was thinking of how blessed we are in our Catholic faith with our liturgical year, and I'm walking in the building, I see all this year of faith stuff, and we have all these holidays, and we have these feast days, and all of these are supposed to keep us kind of refreshed and renewed and connected to our faith. And I was like, other people don't have that. You know, they don't have that. Look at this richness that we have in this liturgical year and the colors and all of this. You know, for a regular secular world out there, how would the calendar year look like without even just Mother's Day, Father's Day, you know, Labor Day, Memorial Day, these things that like are so central to kind of how we operate. And as Catholics, we have that, and we have so much more. So taking advantage and setting even those little things up as faithful are just some little suggestions, things that I've experienced from working with teens over the years. In conclusion, again, I stand up in front of you as somebody who is part of the new evangelization, somebody who's doing this, who didn't think they could do it. You guys, my young people out there, you are the biggest witness that we have is you. The biggest witness that we have when you go off to college, some of you are still in high school, is you going out there and you praying before a meal. You making faith important on Sundays. That's the biggest witness we have. The people who work with kids, who work with youth, who work with young adults, again, the witness that you are to them. That is the biggest thing. I wish we could multiply the 4 people we have here on the panel. And I wish we could say that they're in every school, in every church, in every parish, you know, but they're not. But these kinds of people, these kinds of initiatives, these kinds of things are encouraging them over there. And I cannot be more than positive, because sometimes it can be really daunting looking at where we are in our world today. And as a teacher, it can be really kind of depressing sometimes. But I can't be anything more than positive to see this next generation that, as the keynote was just talking about, is more pro-life than ever. It's more pro-life than ever. So there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of good things to keep in mind. Again, I will be here after. So if you have any questions about what we're doing in the Catholic Ministry team, if you have any questions about the resources, the CDs, again, iTunes, all this new evangelization kind of stuff. We're on Facebook. We tweet. We've got our websites. We've got all of that out there so that we can be meeting the teens, especially the teens and the young adults, exactly where they are in this culture today. Thanks for listening. And now,